Aaron trudged across the jagged plains of the ruined city, each step crunching against broken concrete and shards of metal. The air was thick with dust, making every breath taste like ash. He pulled his tattered jacket tighter around himself, though it offered little warmth against the bitter wind that swept across the desolate landscape. The sun, a pale disk in a clouded sky, barely illuminated the ruins of what had once been a thriving colony. Now it was a wasteland, littered with collapsed buildings, scorched vehicles, and the remnants of hurried evacuations. Humans were few, scattered like shadows, and survival had become a daily battle against hunger, exposure, and predators, both alien and human. Aaron's stomach growled. The last of his food supplies had been gone for a day, leaving him weak and irritable. He scanned the horizon, eyes narrowing at the distant shapes of crumbling skyscrapers. There had to be something left to scavenge, some hidden store or abandoned cache that others had overlooked. He adjusted the strap of his makeshift backpack, feeling the weight of empty cans and worn tools. Every step felt heavier than the last, but he pressed on. A sudden rustle nearby made him freeze. He crouched behind a piece of debris, heart hammering. From the shadows emerged a figure, a young woman, her movements cautious but determined. Her clothes were patched and dirty, but she carried herself with a quiet strength. Aaron had learned long ago not to trust strangers easily, but something about her posture, the way she carried herself despite obvious exhaustion, drew his attention. The woman spotted him as well. Her eyes, sharp and alert, widened for a fraction of a second before she gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Aaron took a careful step forward, keeping his hands visible. "I don't want trouble," he said, his voice rough from disuse and dust. The woman hesitated but didn't retreat. Instead, she lifted a hand in a gesture of peace. Aaron noticed the faint scars along her forearm, evidence of a life filled with hardships. He could almost sense the stories hidden behind her guarded eyes, stories of survival and loss. "I haven't seen anyone else for days," she finally said, her voice soft but steady. "Are you alone?" He had nothing left except a few small rations, barely enough to keep him going. But something inside him stirred, a flicker of empathy, of human kindness that refused to die even in this broken world. He reached into his pack and pulled out the last of his dried protein bars and a half-empty water pouch. "Here, take this," he said, holding them out. Her eyes widened, a mix of surprise and gratitude. "You're giving me your last supplies." Her voice had a warmth to it that reminded Aaron of better times, times before the world had fallen apart. She gestured toward a nearby tent, set up between the ruins of two collapsed buildings. "I have a shelter not far from here. Come rest. You look like you could use it." Strangers had betrayed him before, and every human encounter carried a risk. But something in her eyes told him she wasn't a threat. She wasn't the type to harm someone weaker than herself. And besides, he needed shelter. His body ached, and exhaustion was pressing down on him like a weight he could no longer ignore. He followed her cautiously, keeping his eyes on the shadows around them. The tent was small, patched from old fabrics and tarps, but it was dry and offered protection from the biting wind. She motioned for him to sit on a folded blanket inside. Aaron lowered himself slowly, feeling the relief of shelter almost like a balm against his frayed nerves. The woman sat across from him. Aaron studied her in silence for a moment. Her hair was tangled but thick, falling past her shoulders in dark waves. Her eyes were a strange mixture of human warmth and something harder, alertness honed from years of surviving alone. He noticed a faint bruise along her cheek, likely from a recent encounter with danger. "I'm Leora," she said, breaking the silence. "You are." They sat quietly for a while, the only sounds being the faint wind whistling through the broken buildings outside. Aaron's hunger gnawed at him, but the presence of another human, someone who seemed to understand struggle and endurance, eased his loneliness. Finally, Leora spoke again. "You shouldn't have given me your last food." Her voice wasn't accusing, it was gentle, almost reflective. "It's risky, you could have needed it." She seemed to relax slightly, as if sharing her space and food had bridged an invisible gap between them. Leora leaned back against the tent's frame, exhaling slowly. "I haven't trusted anyone in a long time," she admitted. "Not since everything went wrong." He had lost family, friends, colonies. Every human connection had been tested, broken, or destroyed. "I know what you mean," he said softly. "The world, it doesn't make it easy to trust anyone. Humans trying to create something stronger, better at surviving, soldiers maybe. I escaped." He felt the weight of her words, the loss, the fear, the courage it must have taken to escape. And yet, despite everything, she was alive, standing, fighting. That resilience was something he admired, even envied. "Why tell me this?" he asked finally. "Because you shared your last food with me," Leora replied simply. "You showed me kindness when the world didn't deserve it. Maybe I can trust you." A sudden noise outside, a clang of metal against metal, made them both freeze. Leora's hand instinctively moved to a small blade at her belt, her eyes narrowing toward the tent flap. Erin's body tensed, ready to defend or flee. "Just a scavenger," she whispered after a moment, peering through the small gap in the tent. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Or maybe another human, looking for food." Leora began to hum softly, a tune that seemed both sad and hopeful. Erin felt something stir within him, a cautious optimism, fragile but real. When night fell, they took turns keeping watch. The wind howled through the ruins outside, carrying with it the scent of dust and decay. But inside the tent, there was a fragile safety. Erin thought about the day's events, the sharing of food, the conversation, the trust slowly forming between two strangers in a broken world. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, humanity wasn't finished. That even in a world filled with loss and hardship, human kindness and resilience could endure. As he drifted into an uneasy sleep, Erin made a silent promise to himself. He would protect Leora no matter what dangers came, and perhaps together they could face whatever the ruined world had left for them. The wind had died down by morning, leaving a heavy silence over the ruined city. Erin woke first, his body stiff and sore from the night on the cold ground of the tent. He rubbed his arms, trying to shake off the chill and the lingering tension in his muscles. Across from him, Leora was already awake, sitting with her knees pulled close, her eyes staring into the distance as if she were peering through time itself. "Morning," Erin said softly, not wanting to break the fragile quiet. Leora glanced at him, offering a small nod. "Morning," she replied, her voice low but steady. There was something in her tone that carried a weight, a memory that had yet to be shared. Erin sensed that today she might finally tell him more of her story. He stretched and leaned back, looking around at the tent's interior. The fabric walls were thin, but they offered protection from the world outside, a small bubble of safety. Erin wondered how long it had been since Leora had felt anything resembling comfort. He knew the answer didn't matter. What mattered was that she was here alive and trusting him enough to share a space. Leora broke the silence first, her gaze fixed on a tear in the tent fabric. "I never had a family," she said quietly. "At least, not one I remember. They took me when I was very young," she continued. "Humans, my own kind, they thought I could be useful. They experimented on me, changed me in ways I still don't understand fully. I was supposed to be stronger, faster, smarter than anyone else. A perfect soldier." He had heard stories of the human-alien hybrid programs, but to meet someone who had lived through it was another thing entirely. That must have been awful," he said softly. Leora nodded, her lips pressed together. "It was. I lost everything. Friends, people who tried to help me, even myself sometimes. They didn't care if I wanted it or not. I was just a project to them. I didn't belong to anyone except those walls and those people. I had to escape. I knew the security patterns, and I used everything they had taught me to survive on my own. I didn't look back. Until now. I understand why you ran," he said softly. "I've seen what people will do to survive, what they will take from each other. I've lost people too. But I think, maybe, when you find someone worth trusting, it can make all the difference. That's not something many would do." The city was a graveyard, but here, inside the small tent, there was a fragile thread of life connecting them. Erin broke the silence. "I want to help you. If we stick together, we might have a better chance of surviving out there. Maybe more than any alien or machine. Humans, we survive, even when it seems impossible." Her emotions, her fears, her hopes, they were all raw, all real. "Humans have a way of surprising people," she said finally, almost to herself. "Even when the odds are against us, we find a way to endure. Even when the world is falling apart. This is where I've been," she said, tracing a finger along jagged lines and symbols. "I've traveled through ruins, deserts, and forests, mostly alone. I've avoided the patrols, the raiders, the scavengers, even alien patrols. I don't know any other way. But it doesn't make you happy." Erin told Leora about the colonies he had scavenged, the people he had met, and the hardships he had endured. She listened, occasionally interjecting with her own experiences, painting a vivid picture of a world torn apart by conflict and greed. "You've seen a lot," she said finally, her voice tinged with awe. Not many survive what you've survived. I've had my share of close calls, but I've learned humans adapt. We find a way even when there's no reason to hope. In a world that had been stripped of kindness and filled with danger, hearing such recognition felt rare, almost precious. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden noise outside, a sharp crack like metal scraping stone. Both of them froze. Leora reached for her blade again, her movements fluid and practiced. Aaron grabbed a sturdy piece of metal from the floor, ready to defend. The sound repeated closer this time. Aaron motioned toward the flap of the tent. "Should we check it?" he whispered. Leora shook her head. "No, stay low, observe first. It could be a scavenger or worse." Aaron's pulse quickened, but he reminded himself to stay calm. Panic would only make mistakes. After a tense few moments, the shadow of a small animal, or perhaps a human, slipped past the edge of the tent. Aaron exhaled slowly, lowering the metal in his hands. Leora watched intently until the figure disappeared from sight. "That was close," Aaron muttered, his voice tight with tension. Leora nodded, but there was no fear in her expression, only focus. "It's always close," she said softly. "Out there, danger is constant. We survive not because it's safe, but because we're ready to face it." And somehow in her presence, he felt a growing sense of hope, not just for survival, but for what it meant to be human. The day passed slowly. They scavenged for water and supplies nearby, moving carefully among the ruins, constantly alert to any sign of danger. Leora's knowledge of the terrain and her instincts kept them safe. Aaron marveled at her ability to navigate the wasteland, to anticipate threats before they appeared. He realized that despite her past, despite everything she had endured, she was still deeply human, smart, adaptable, and full of determination. By evening, they returned to the tent, exhausted but triumphant. They shared a simple meal, speaking little, letting the quiet companionship soothe the ache of the day. Outside, the ruined city lay silent under the dim light of the setting sun. As night fell again, Aaron and Leora took turns keeping watch, the bond between them growing stronger with each passing hour. Trust had begun to take root, fragile but undeniable. And as Aaron drifted into sleep, he felt something he hadn't in a long time, the faint, fragile hope that together they could face whatever the ruined world threw at them. The next morning arrived with a dull gray sky, and the wind carried the faint scent of smoke and scorched earth. Aaron rubbed his eyes, feeling every ache in his body after another restless night. Leora was already moving, crouched near the entrance of the tent, scanning the ruins outside with sharp, careful eyes. She gestured for him to come closer. "There's movement near the old factory," she said quietly. "Not far from here." "Scavengers?" he asked, gripping the metal rod he carried from the previous day. "Maybe humans, maybe something else," Leora replied, her tone calm but alert. "We need to be careful." The ruins were like a maze of broken walls and twisted steel, perfect for hiding both prey and predator. Aaron was grateful for Leora's experience. She moved silently, her instincts guiding them like a shadow. As they approached the factory, the shadows became clearer. 3 figures were rummaging through crates near a partially collapsed entrance. They were human scavengers armed with makeshift weapons, faces smeared with grime. Aaron recognized the desperate look in their eyes, the same look he had seen in himself countless times. Hunger had driven them here, but it could just as easily turn to aggression. Leora crouched behind a fallen beam and whispered, "We can avoid them." "Stay quiet, follow my lead." She lunged forward, grabbing a piece of debris and swinging it with precision. The nearest scavenger stumbled back, surprised. The others hesitated, unsure how to respond to her sudden, fierce attack. "Run!" Leora shouted, grabbing Aaron's arm. They bolted through a narrow gap in the factory wall, their feet pounding against concrete and rubble. Behind them, shouts and the sound of pursuit rose. Aaron could feel his lungs burning, his muscles straining, but Leora's grip and guidance kept him moving. They darted into a small alleyway, using the shadows for cover. Aaron peered back and saw the scavengers halt at the factory entrance, frustrated and angry. Leora exhaled sharply, her body trembling slightly from the adrenaline. "That was too close," Aaron said, trying to catch his breath. She nodded. They were desperate. Hunger makes people dangerous. Inside the tunnel, they finally slowed, their breathing heavy. Aaron leaned against the wall, still catching his breath. You handled them well," he said, admiration in his voice. Leora shrugged, though a small smile appeared. "Years of surviving on my own, you learn quickly. I can teach you too." "I think I've learned a lot just by following you. We need to stay strong if we're going to survive out there." "What did they make you do?" And even then, they controlled how I survived. You need strategy, awareness, and sometimes a bit of luck. They needed a safer location, somewhere more defensible. Leora suggested a cluster of abandoned buildings a few miles away, structures that had once been part of a residential complex. It was risky, but it offered the potential for water collection, shelter, and better vantage points. As they prepared to leave the tunnel, a sudden noise made them both freeze. It was faint at first, a scraping sound coming from the tunnel entrance. Leora motioned for silence, her body tense. Aaron gripped his metal rod, ready for anything. A figure emerged from the shadows, a lone scavenger smaller than the others, carrying a crude weapon. He froze when he saw them, eyes wide with fear and uncertainty. Leora stepped forward, calm but firm. "Who are you? What do you want? We won't hurt you if you don't try anything." He led them to a small, hidden reservoir beneath a collapsed building, enough water to refill their containers. Nearby, they found a stash of canned food, probably left by someone long gone. Aaron and Leora quickly collected what they could carry. As they worked, Aaron observed Leora closely. Her movements were precise and efficient, every action deliberate. He realized that her survival skills weren't just physical. They were mental, emotional, and instinctive. She had learned to read people, anticipate threats, and act decisively. It was a skill set that he admired deeply, and he felt grateful to have her as an ally. After they secured the supplies, they returned to their temporary shelter. Aaron felt a growing sense of partnership forming between them. They had faced danger together, made decisions together, and survived. Trust was no longer fragile. It was solidifying, built on shared experience and mutual respect. That night, as they huddled in the small tent, Leora spoke again. "Humans, we survive because we adapt, because we learn, we plan, and we fight when necessary. Even when the odds are against us." Outside, the ruins were dark and silent, but inside there was warmth, a fragile human warmth that neither of them had felt in a long time. As they prepared to sleep, Leora glanced at Aaron. "Tomorrow, we move toward the residential complex," she said. "It will be dangerous, but it offers more safety. And maybe a chance to find others like us." But inside the small shelter, they had something rare: trust, companionship, and a shared will to survive. And as Aaron drifted into sleep, he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. They would face whatever came next, together, and humanity in all its resilience and courage would endure. The sky was a dull gray as Aaron and Leora set out toward the residential complex, moving carefully through the shattered streets of the city. The ruins stretched endlessly, jagged towers and collapsed buildings forming a dangerous maze. Every step required caution. Debris threatened to collapse underfoot, and the wind carried faint sounds that might have been scavengers, or worse, predators. Leora led the way, her movements silent and precise. Aaron followed, trusting her instincts. They passed a half-collapsed highway, its concrete slabs jutting into the air like broken teeth. Aaron glanced around nervously. "How much further?" he asked. "Not far," Leora replied, her eyes scanning the horizon. "But we'll need to be careful. This area is dangerous. People aren't the only threat out here." Her presence was a steadying force, a reminder that he was not alone in this world. They reached a narrow street lined with broken vehicles and rubble. Leora crouched behind a twisted piece of metal and signaled for Aaron to do the same. Peering through the debris, she pointed to a shadow moving in the distance. "Watch," she whispered. "There are scavengers ahead. We'll need to wait until they move on." They moved quickly, slipping between shadows, keeping low to avoid being seen. The city around them was silent except for the occasional clatter of debris underfoot. Every corner held potential danger, yet they pressed on, driven by the hope of finding the residential complex. As they approached the outskirts of the complex, the ruins became denser. The buildings, though damaged, still held a sense of structure. Windows were shattered and walls were scorched, but the area offered more protection than the open streets. Leora paused and gestured for Aaron to crouch behind a fallen wall. "Here's the challenge," she said quietly. "The complex is partially collapsed, but it could provide shelter and water. We need to move carefully. It's likely scavengers, or worse, have been here already." Leora led him through a series of narrow hallways, avoiding weakened floors and loose debris. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the hall. Aaron froze. Leora's hand went to her blade, her eyes scanning the darkness. "Stay close," she whispered. A pair of alien predators emerged from the shadows. They were small but fast, with sleek, armored bodies and glowing eyes that pierced the dim light. They hissed, moving toward the intruders with predatory grace. Aaron's pulse raced. He had never faced anything like this in the open, and fear surged through him. But Leora moved with confidence, stepping in front of him and drawing one of the predators toward her. She swung her blade with precision, cutting the creature's path and forcing it to retreat. "Keep moving," she shouted, pulling Aaron along. They ran down a hallway, dodging debris and leaping over obstacles. The second predator lunged, but Leora anticipated its movement, striking with a well-aimed kick that sent it crashing into a broken wall. They reached a small room with a reinforced door. Leora pushed it closed, and they collapsed against it, breathing heavily. Aaron's heart was pounding, but he felt a surge of admiration for Leora. Her skill, her instinct, her ability to remain calm under pressure, it was extraordinary. "We're not safe yet," Leora said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline. "They may return and scavengers might be nearby. We need to fortify this room and find resources." The room was small but contained a few pieces of furniture they could use to barricade the door. Together, they stacked tables, chairs, and debris, creating a temporary defense. Leora moved with efficiency, and Aaron followed her lead, learning from her experience. Once the room was secured, they examined their surroundings. The room had a small water pipe running along one wall, partially damaged but still functional. Leora tested it and managed to get a trickle of water. They filled their containers, a small victory in a hostile world. "We need to stay here for the night," Leora said. "It's safer and we can plan our next move." They shared a simple meal from the supplies they had collected earlier, speaking little, letting the quiet companionship settle between them. Outside, the ruins remained dark and silent, but inside there was a fragile warmth, the comfort of human connection in a dangerous world. As night fell, Leora kept watch while Aaron rested. He could hear her soft breathing, steady and controlled, and felt a sense of trust he had not known for a long time. When it was his turn to keep watch, he observed the ruins from a narrow window, alert to every movement. The city was unforgiving, but together they were stronger. The next morning, they prepared to move deeper into the complex. Leora had identified a central courtyard where water could be collected from rain runoff, and it offered better visibility of the surrounding area. They navigated through collapsed corridors and broken staircases, careful to avoid weak floors. As they reached the courtyard, Aaron noticed signs of recent human activity. Footprints, scattered tools, and discarded food containers indicated others had been there recently. Leora examined the area, her eyes narrowing. "They've been here," she said quietly. "We're not alone. If we move carefully, we can observe them and avoid conflict. We move when they're distracted or gone. Rushing would be dangerous." She had a way of analyzing the situation, anticipating threats, and making decisions that increased their chances of survival. Finally, the scavengers moved on, leaving the courtyard empty. Leora motioned for Aaron to follow. They moved quickly and silently, gathering supplies left behind. A few small containers of water, scraps of food, and a few tools would help them survive longer. As they worked, Aaron felt a growing sense of partnership with Leora. They had faced danger together, made decisions together, and survived. Trust was no longer fragile. It was solidifying, built on shared experience and mutual reliance. By evening, they secured their temporary shelter and prepared for the night. Aaron reflected on the day's events, the close calls, the strategies, the constant need for vigilance. It was exhausting, but he felt a sense of purpose he had not felt in a long time. Leora noticed his thoughts and smiled faintly. "You're learning quickly," she said. "By tomorrow, you'll be ready for the challenges ahead." "I feel safer with you," he admitted. "Even in this city of ruins, I feel hope." Outside, the ruins remained dark and silent, but inside they had something rare: trust, companionship, and a shared will to survive. As Aaron drifted into sleep, he thought about the journey ahead. The residential complex offered shelter and resources, but it also promised challenges. Scavengers, predators, and the unforgiving environment would test them at every turn. But with Leora by his side, he felt a growing confidence. Together, they could face the dangers of this broken world. And somewhere in the darkness, in the ruins of a city long abandoned, humanity endured, not because the world was kind, but because humans adapted, fought, and found strength in each other. The morning air was heavy with dust and the faint smell of burned metal. Aaron and Leora stood at the edge of the residential complex, peering through broken walls at the partially collapsed buildings ahead. The ruins stretched like a city frozen in pain, and yet, amidst the destruction, there was promise, shelter, water, and perhaps even other survivors. "This is it," Leora said quietly, scanning the area. If we make it through today, we'll have a safe place to rest and plan our next steps. Yet despite the danger, Aaron felt a growing sense of determination. He and Leora had survived so much already, and this final stretch felt like the culmination of their journey. As they approached the central courtyard, they saw signs of recent human activity, footprints in the dust, scattered containers, and the faint glimmer of sunlight reflecting off a small water source. Leora crouched behind a broken wall, her eyes scanning. "There," she whispered, "water, shelter, but we're not alone. We don't have to fight unless we have to." Hunger and fear had made them aggressive, but Leora's confidence and calm presence seemed to give them pause. Slowly, they lowered their weapons. One stepped forward, a young man with dirt-streaked cheeks. "There's not much left," he said cautiously. "Food, water, you'll have to share. Others may come." As they secured the supplies, a sudden sound made everyone freeze, a low, guttural growl from the shadows. Aaron's pulse quickened. Leora drew her blade, scanning the darkness. Alien predators emerged, sleek and fast, moving with lethal intent. Their glowing eyes reflected the dim light of the ruined city. "Stay behind me," Leora shouted to Aaron and the scavengers. Aaron's hands gripped the metal rod tightly, muscles tense. He had faced danger before, but the predators were faster, more cunning. The humans scattered, looking for cover, while Leora stepped into the open, her movements fluid and precise. She dodged and struck with deadly accuracy, using the environment to her advantage. Aaron realized something important. Humans were not weak. They were adaptable. Even when faced with superior strength, superior speed, and superior instincts, humans had intelligence, courage, and teamwork on their side. He moved alongside Leora, helping fend off the creatures, using debris and improvised weapons. Together, they created barriers, forcing the predators to retreat. The scavengers, inspired by Leora's confidence, joined in cautiously, using whatever they could to defend themselves. After a tense and exhausting struggle, the predators retreated into the shadows. Everyone breathed heavily, relief washing over them. Aaron looked at Leora with admiration. You did it," he said. "You saved all of us." "We did it, all of us." She and Aaron worked alongside the scavengers, moving debris, barricading doors, and setting up a small perimeter. As they worked, Aaron noticed something remarkable. Humans thrived in adversity. Even broken, hungry, and scared, they were capable of cooperation, problem-solving, and resilience. It was a human instinct to adapt, to survive, and to fight together. By evening, the central building was secured. Water had been collected, and a small fire provided warmth and light. The scavengers, once wary and aggressive, now sat together quietly, sharing stories and rations with Aaron and Leora. Trust had been built through shared effort and shared danger. Leora leaned against a wall, exhausted but satisfied. "We did more than survive today," she said softly. "We found a way to thrive, even in a ruined city. We survive." And yet, despite everything, he felt hope. Humans were not just survivors, they were fighters, thinkers, and allies. Together, they could face anything. The next morning, Aaron woke to find Leora already surveying the city from a high vantage point. She motioned for him to come closer. "There's more to explore," she said. "Other survivors, other resources, but today we rest and plan. Strength comes from preparation, not recklessness." As they rested, they discussed plans to expand their safe zone, to create a small community within the complex. Leora suggested establishing watch points, rationing supplies, and using the surrounding buildings for shelter. Aaron contributed ideas too, using his experience navigating the ruins. Together, they formed a plan that balanced safety with efficiency, showing that humans could strategize and cooperate under pressure. Hours later, they began setting up small signals, reflective surfaces, markers, and noise traps to alert them to approaching danger. Leora demonstrated how to use the environment, turning rubble into barriers and traps, making the complex defensible against both human and alien threats. Aaron followed her instructions carefully, learning quickly. He realized that in this world, knowledge and adaptability were as important as courage. By late afternoon, the residential complex had become a small fortress, a safe haven amidst chaos. The scavengers, now allies, helped organize supplies, collect water, and maintain the perimeter. Aaron and Leora moved among them, teaching and guiding, building trust and leadership. As night fell, Aaron watched the small group gathered around a fire, faces illuminated by the flickering light. He felt a deep sense of pride. Humanity had endured even when hope seemed lost. Their resilience, intelligence, and courage had brought them together, turning strangers into allies and ruins into a safe place. Leora joined him, her expression calm and determined. "Look at them," she said softly. "They're scared, tired, and hungry, but they're human, and humans survive. We survived, we'll keep surviving, and one day maybe we'll rebuild more than this." As he drifted to sleep, Aaron reflected on the journey with Leora, how sharing a simple act of kindness, a small amount of food, had led to trust, partnership, and survival. They had faced scavengers, predators, and the unforgiving environment, and yet here they were, stronger for it. Leora's words echoed in his mind. Humans endure, we adapt, we survive. Humans were small, fragile, and often underestimated, but they possessed something no predator or experiment could take away: heart, courage, and the will to survive against all odds. Tomorrow they would continue their journey. They would explore the rest of the complex, search for more survivors, and expand their safe zone. But tonight they rested, knowing that humanity's greatest strength was not in weapons or technology. It was in the people themselves, the bonds they formed, and the courage to face whatever came next. And so, in the ruins of a fallen city, amidst dust, decay, and danger, humans endured. They survived because they adapted, because they trusted each other, and because even in a cruel, broken world, they refused to give up. And Aaron knew, as he closed his eyes, that as long as humans had courage, heart, and determination, they would endure forever.